So today I'm going to talk you through how to manage prepayments and overpayments in Xero. They are pretty much the same thing, but you use them in different ways. So where you would use them is if you had a supplier or a customer where you wanted to show payments on their account before you allocate them to a specific invoice. And there are subtly different ways in which to show it, and it's a preference as to which you use, in all honesty. So what I'm going to do is show you both of them, and then going forward you can decide which you prefer, and I'll give you some pointers at the end as to why you would choose one over the other. So firstly, let's assume number one, we've come into we're doing it from the bank account. So I'm going to go in and reconcile an account, and here we have it's already picking up an invoice. So just say let's pick one that's on account. Let's pick a supplier. Swanston Security. Now we're going to pretend that Swanston don't have an invoice, and what we want to show is that we've paid them some money, and that money is a deposit or it's money on account. So first of all, let's show it as a deposit or money prepaid. And as I said before, you can use either prepayments or overpaid to do it. So if we go to add details, making sure that you're in the create screen, I come down, and under here where it says spent as, I'm going to choose prepayment. Now you can cut and paste here and just put money on deposit or whatever you want to put in there. I'm gonna for quickness put the same, Control V, and it's 59.55, and then you choose an account for this money to be shown. Now with prepayments you have to actually allocate an account from your chart of accounts. The obvious one is the prepayments account. Now I don't advise necessarily using this one, even though the official line for Xero is to use it. It's because prepayments, from an accounting point of view, we tend to use them for payments that you've made in advance at a point in time, usually at year end, but at some point it will be allocated to an invoice or allocated to a bill. Now if that's the case with you, no harm done, use this one. But sometimes you may want to show things as a deposit which will sit there indefinitely. So say for example you're going to hire some equipment and you want to show a deposit which you will be refunded at the end of your equipment usage. You might want to show that in a different account. You might want to show it for deposits for equipment, or just deposits, refundable deposits is probably a better one. So that's a decision you need to make. But for now, we'll stick to the prepayments, not to overcomplicate matters. It's just to illustrate really how the function works. Okay, so we've put that in, and we save the transaction and OK that. So now if I go to the chart of accounts and I look for prepayments, which I think is 620, you'll see that under prepayments it shows there's a balance in there of 59.55 because there wasn't anything there before, it was sitting at 0. So that's where it posts it to. Now just say you then decide that you want to allocate that to an invoice. You would then go to Swanston Security, click on that. Now the first thing to note is that there you'll see your prepayment at 59.55, so we've overpaid by a penny. The thing to note with prepayments though is that it doesn't change the overall balance of what you owe the supplier. So if you are looking at an age creditors report to see how much you owe, at a glance to a supplier. It won't show you this necessarily there unless you come in here to look at the actual supplier themselves. So that is the reason that I'm not a great lover of it, because I want to see who I owe in any report that comes up. If we go into here and view it, when you come into the actual prepayment on deposit, as it's called, or money on deposit as I've put it, you see here that you get prepayment options. So you can do one of two things. As I said earlier, you may want to use this one because you've hired some equipment, or you've paid money up front and they're now going to pay it to you back. So you can actually here, you'll see receive a cash refund. You can actually at that later date come in here and refund the money back to the account. And then when it actually appears in your account, you can marry it off or reconcile it in the bank if you are aware that it's coming. Alternatively, you just wait till it appears in the bank and you just create it that way. But the other option is here, you'll see it has prepayment options and it says Allocate Credit. So if I click on that, it will take me into a screen where it shows me my invoices, and here I can allocate it against an invoice. Now, as we see, the invoice here is only for $59.54, so that's going to be all we can allocate, and it will show a remaining credit of a penny. Allocate that credit. Shows you the bill payment. So if we go back to Swanston Security, only now that it has been allocated will you see that your balance has now changed, because it's actually allocated it and it shows that the bill has been paid and you don't owe anything. But we know that we've overpaid by a penny. Again, it doesn't show it. So prepayments really are where you know that the money that you paid exactly matches the money that you're either going to be refunded or is going to be allocated to an invoice. And conversely, if you're doing it for sales, you may take prepaid money or deposit for the first part of an invoice. So if you're doing an event and you've charged them up front for the drinks, you'll do the bill for the drinks, take the money up front, and when you do the full invoice, you can allocate it, or you might just do an invoice just for the drinks and allocate it that way. But as you can see, if I then go back to the chart of accounts, now that we've allocated that, and if I refresh it, you can see here that the $59.54 part that we used is gone, but here it's still showing the penny. So with prepayments, it takes you to a specific place where you can make a decision that all prepayments at some point have to be balanced out and go back to zero. So this actually works as a good control account to see how much money that you're holding on deposit for people, or that you've paid out in deposits that you're due back. And that's where I would use that, as opposed to allocating it as money on deposit. How should I put it? Money on deposit, money in credit under a supplier or customer account. And to explain that a bit more clearly, rather than a convoluted one I've just given you, I'll show you how overpayments work. All right. Because you've already seen that one, and to keep the comparison, I'm going to go and find the one we just did for Swanston Security, which is here. So I'm going to click on it because I'm going to use that again, and remove and redo. Yes, you want to remove it. Remember, if it's from a downloaded transaction and you do remove and redo, it just means it reappears back in the reconciled screen. Okay, so now we go back to add details again, and Swanston Security. This time we're going to choose overpayment, payment, in fact payment on account, in here payment on account. Now the difference here with overpayment, this time you don't get a choice as to what chart of account or what nominal code you put it under. It automatically brings up the accounts payable, or the creditor's control account in the UK. And what that does, it then means that the amount you owe to suppliers is increasing or decreasing. In this case, it's decreasing because you're showing money going into the accounts payable, but it doesn't show against the supplier bill because it still remains unpaid, but it does have an effect that the prepayment doesn't. So let me save that. We okay that. So then if I go back to, not sure why that's not showing me there, but there it is. So if we go into Swanston, the difference between the prepayment, if you remember with the prepayment, even though it showed that money had been received, so you had the payment on account, it had absolutely no effect on the overall that was due to that supplier. But the overpayment does. So even though here you'll see the overpayment, up here, what amount you owe has now changed, even though it hasn't been allocated to an invoice. And that's why in terms of money on account to suppliers before I am ready to allocate them to a bill, this is my preferred one because I want to see the balance of the supplier or the customer account change in line with how much money is actually owed to the supplier or actually owed to me from the customer. And in exactly the same way, you can either go into the invoice or go into the overpayment. Let's go into the overpayment because that's what we're dealing with. Here you can see you can also receive a cash refund. You have overpayment options. You can allocate the credit. And here you can put in the amount. You can click cash refund from here as well. And it's exactly the same. I'm not going to do it. And then we go back into Swanson Security. And let's say the difference is that the overall amount won't change because it was already updated before. All that's happened is you've now allocated an invoice. So to recap, remember also you can do it without it appearing in the bank. So if you know that you're going to pay a bill or make a payment on account and it's not in the bank yet, you're just going to do it so that when it comes through the bank, you're going to actually reconcile it. I'll show you how, I'll recap and then show you spend money if it's a bill and pick your bank account. Next. And then in this case, you'd have to put the supplier in yourself. So I don't know, we'll pick another one. A city agency, anybody, doesn't really matter. Put a date in, payment on account. You may be more pedantic than me. I'm being lazy. Payment on account. Decide what you're doing. So if it's the prepayment, let's call it deposit. Refundable. If it's the prepayment, quantity, the amount, £58, you have to choose an account which is your allocated prepayments or your deposit account. Alternatively, if you want it to show as money that reduces what you owe to the supplier, choose overpayment. It's not a refundable deposit because you're actually just trying to make payments to pay down what you owe. So that is generally a payment on account. And you can see that it goes into your payments on account or accounts payable nominal here, and you choose that one. So you can do it from here, as we said before. If it's in the bank, you do it via the bank. If it's payment on account from a customer, then it's exactly the same. You just choose receive money. And instead of it being accounts payable, I'll do it to show you. Instead of it being accounts payable, it's actually overpayment. Accounts receivable. So that's going into the account, the control account that reduces or increases how much your customers owe you. Again, with the prepayment, it goes exactly the same into the prepayment or deposits. That's just the standard account for that. You can split them if you want to, if you wanted to see deposits specifically from customers for income, but that's something to discuss with your accounts person, or if it's you or your accountant. As with Xero, there are many places you can do the same transaction. So if we go back to the bank account, so if it appears in the bank in a reconciliation screen, then you just mark it off as I've showed you. You can go up here, add spend money or receive money. You can do it from here, new transaction. Now bear in mind, the only thing with this one is it doesn't actually give you the option to give overpayments or underpayments. You could still do it and choose prepayments from here, but this really is just to add quick direct payments. The other place you can do it is up here, spend money or receive money. And that's pretty much it for prepayments and overpayments. I hope that was useful for you.